Late at night, when most of the front lines had fallen silent and the bitter winter wind had settled over the trenches, Ukrainian reconnaissance teams intercepted unusual radio gaps across several Russian sectors. For weeks, Moscow's frontline units had been operating under high pressure, responding to non-stop drone harassment, supply shortages, and unpredictable artillery strikes. But on this particular night, something changed. Russian surveillance drones were grounded due to heavy fog, patrols were reduced, and communication lines were unusually slow. That's when Ukrainian commanders realized the opportunity they had been waiting for. This wasn't just a small window, it was the perfect moment to strike harder than ever before. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Conflict Front Stories channel. Please subscribe and like my videos as we take you inside the biggest Ukrainian strike that caught Moscow completely off guard. The story begins on the frozen outskirts of Kharkiv, where Ukrainian special units had been preparing a coordinated offensive for nearly 3 weeks. Exterior conditions were brutal. Snowdrifts buried old trenches, ruined buildings groaned under icy winds, and the eerie silence suggested that both sides were conserving energy for the next phase of combat. In this cold emptiness, Ukrainian drone analysts monitored Russian troop movements on high-resolution screens, noticing that Russia had relaxed its air defense alert posture. Rotational units returning from the front were taking longer rest breaks, fuel convoys were moving slower, and several radar stations seemed to be running on reduced capacity. All of these indicators pointed to one thing: Russia was not expecting any major attack on this night. Inside a dimly lit Ukrainian command room, the interior mood was tense but focused. Officers spoke in clipped whispers, studying coordinates and timing charts. A NATO-manufactured digital map glowed across the main wall, showing Russian air defense clusters, ammunition depots, logistic hubs, and rail routes. The short briefing ended with a simple but decisive message: "Tonight, we hit them everywhere at once." Even the most experienced soldiers felt the weight of the moment, because large-scale synchronized strikes require flawless timing. One wrong move and Russia's powerful S-400 systems could destroy half the drones before they reached their targets. But Ukrainian crews trusted their intelligence. Russia wasn't ready. Exterior scenes shift to a long-abandoned airstrip where dozens of Ukrainian long-range drones sat lined up under netted camouflage. The icy fog rolled across their wings as technicians carried out the final checks. Batteries were warmed, GPS jammers were tested, and payloads were locked in. A row of operators sat in separate trucks, each with multiple screens displaying thermal, optical, and satellite feeds. When the order finally came through, launch phase 1, engines ignited with a soft buzz. One after another, the drones shot into the dark sky, nearly silent, blending into the winter clouds. Interior voices inside the operations truck spoke rapidly as screens lit up with dozens of flight paths converging toward Russian-held territory. Ukraine had launched more drones in a single wave than at any time in the war. Operators monitored their positions carefully, adjusting altitudes to evade detection. The interior room remained mostly quiet except for occasional confirmations. Target lock confirmed, entering Russian surveillance range, switching to low-frequency signal. Exterior footage would show the drones gliding over destroyed forests, cracked highways, and silent Russian checkpoint posts. Most of the Russian radar stations were operating on reduced sensitivity, likely due to energy conservation protocols. This small mistake allowed Ukrainian drones to slip deep behind enemy lines. As they crossed into the Belgorod region, Russian anti-air defenses finally detected a fraction of the swarm, but by then it was too late. The air was filled with dozens of incoming signals, overwhelming operators who only had a few seconds to decide which targets to prioritize. Interior chaos took over Russian command rooms. Alarm sirens rang across multiple bases, with officers shouting orders through overloaded communication channels. One officer yelled, "We don't know the scale, everything is lighting up." The short interior scene captures panic as air defense crews scrambled to reboot systems and switched to high alert mode. But because Russia had relaxed its 24/7 surveillance in certain areas, rebooting took longer than normal, costing them precious time. Exterior strike footage begins with the first explosions hitting a major Russian logistic depot used to supply artillery shells to the Belgorod and Kursk fronts. Night turned into a brief flash of orange light as ammunition crates ignited. Fireballs rose hundreds of meters into the air as secondary explosions erupted. Within minutes, multiple Russian fuel stations also went up in flames, leaving their supply trucks charred and overturned. Several key railway junctions were struck almost simultaneously, halting troop movement toward the border. Interior scenes in Ukrainian command centers erupted with restrained celebration. Officers monitored the strike patterns and confirmed hit after hit. The short interior dialogue captured the emotional intensity. "That's the rail hub. Direct hit. The fuel station is burning. Repeat strike successful. Multiple secondary explosions. Russia's ammo reserves are gone." But despite the excitement, Ukrainian crews remained disciplined, preparing for Russia's inevitable countermeasures. Exterior visuals then jumped to Moscow-controlled air bases farther from the front. These bases housed fighter jets, bombers, and maintenance hangars. Normally, they were heavily guarded with layered defenses. But on this night, Ukraine unleashed its second wave, long-range drones and modified cruise missiles that flew at extremely low altitudes. Russian S-300 and S-400 batteries attempted intercepts, successfully downing some, but the swarm was simply too large. One missile slammed into a parked Su-34 strike aircraft, sending debris scattering across the runway. Moments later, another explosion ripped through a maintenance building, igniting jet fuel reserves. Interior Russian military rooms attempted to respond, but fragmented communication left officers guessing whether the attack was localized or nationwide. Some bases had full power outages due to earlier drone hits on nearby substations. Others were firing blindly into the sky without accurate tracking. The short interior scene reflects mounting confusion. "We lost the southern grid. We're blind in Sector 3. We need immediate reinforcements. We don't know where the next hit is coming." Exterior shots portray the largest explosion of the night. Ukraine's hit on a major Russian Black Sea Fleet logistics warehouse. This facility stored spare parts, naval fuel tanks, and critical equipment required for ship operations. When the missile detonated, the shockwave was felt miles away, shattering windows in nearby towns. Flames engulfed the entire facility, and rising smoke clouds could be seen on satellite imagery within minutes. This single strike crippled Russia's ability to resupply several naval units. Interior Ukrainian analysts quickly assessed the results. Short sentences echoed a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. "This is their biggest loss in months. We finally caught them off guard. The timing was perfect." They reviewed satellite imagery showing destroyed depots, charred rail cars, and burning warehouses. These real-time confirmations made it clear that Ukraine had not only struck hard, it had reshaped the momentum of the battlefield. Exterior camera views followed the aftermath at several Russian bases. Fire trucks scrambled to control massive blazes, soldiers moved injured personnel, and emergency lights flickered across damaged infrastructure. Russia's Ministry of Defense attempted to release a statement claiming that most drones were intercepted, but videos from local residents told a different story. Explosions thundered across multiple regions, and social media feeds filled with footage of fireballs and smoke columns. Interior Ukrainian political leaders received updates through secure channels. The short interior setting highlights calm but determined discussions. This was necessary, one advisor said. Their relaxed posture was our chance, another added. The Ukrainian president was briefed on the scale of success. Dozens of Russian supply lines severely damaged, multiple air bases struck, and Moscow's air defense confidence shaken. Exterior ground reports from Russian soldiers revealed even deeper consequences. Without ammunition flowing steadily to the front, several Russian units were forced to ration artillery fire. Some units reported delays in receiving food supplies due to damaged rail routes. Drone teams complained they lacked fuel, while armored battalions waited for replacement parts that would no longer arrive on time. Ukrainian reconnaissance forces confirmed that the strike had disrupted Russia's logistics so severely that some frontline positions were forced into temporary retreat. Interior frontline Ukrainian units shared short but emotional reactions. Soldiers watching the distant glow of explosions felt a surge of morale, knowing their country had delivered one of its most effective blows of the entire war. One soldier whispered, "This is what happens when they underestimate us." Another added, "Tonight, our drones spoke louder than any words." Exterior strategic analysis suggests that Ukraine carefully waited for signs of Russian fatigue, reduced drone patrols, slower resupply convoys, relaxed radar sweeps, and predictable troop rotations. These small indicators pointed toward a rare moment of vulnerability. Rather than launching smaller, frequent attacks, Ukraine held back its resources and waited. Then, in one coordinated wave, they unleashed their biggest strike yet. The results were devastating for Moscow. Interior expert discussions later emphasized how Ukraine's intelligence advantage, combined with Western satellite information, allowed them to identify exactly when Russia had lowered its defenses. Short summaries from analysts explained that Russia's desire to conserve energy and reduce stress on radar systems created blind spots. These blind spots became the gateways for Ukrainian drones and missiles. Exterior footage the next morning revealed long stretches of railway lines twisted and burned, large tanker trucks melted into the ground, and ammunition depots reduced to smoking craters. The sky above Belgorod remained hazy with rising smoke. Local Russian residents recorded videos showing military ambulances rushing through the streets, while emergency crews attempted to contain fires that continued burning well into daylight. Interior Ukrainian command rooms maintained calm efficiency. Short exchanges followed. Prepare for counterstrikes, monitor air defense changes, assess new vulnerabilities. They knew Russia would respond, but for once, Ukraine had seized the initiative. Exterior voices from international analysts highlighted the impact. Several pointed out that Ukraine hitting multiple regions at once forced Russia to spread its defenses thinner. Others noted that Ukraine's ability to produce large numbers of cost-effective drones was shifting the balance of air warfare. The strike demonstrated that even one of the world's largest militaries could be overwhelmed through timing, intelligence, and precision. Interior reflections among Ukrainian planners hinted at future operations. They believed that this massive strike was not just a tactical victory but a strategic warning. If Russia continued to underestimate Ukraine's capabilities, more coordinated attacks could follow. The short interior scene underscores confidence but also caution, acknowledging that every victory comes with risks. Exterior closing visuals show the war-torn landscapes across eastern Ukraine, illuminated by the early morning sun. Smoke from distant Russian bases drifts across the horizon, marking the aftermath of Ukraine's perfectly timed ambush. Soldiers stand atop ruined trenches, looking toward the horizon with renewed determination. The once silent night had turned into one of the most destructive blows Moscow had experienced in months. Ukraine waited patiently. It studied every weakness, every delay, every gap in Russia's defenses. And when the moment finally came, Ukraine struck with precision, power, and coordination unmatched in recent operations. What seemed like a quiet winter night became the stage for a devastating surprise attack that shook Russian command structures and shifted the momentum of the war. As the smoke settles, one thing becomes clear: Russia relaxed, Ukraine didn't. And that mistake cost Moscow dearly. If you enjoyed this deep dive analysis, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned for the next detailed report on conflict front stories, where we bring you the most intense battlefield updates with accuracy, clarity, and compelling storytelling.